Hi, friends. Welcome to the Women in Web3 interview series. I'm your host, Alex, and I'm the community manager for CharmVerse. CharmVerse is a Web3 operations platform handling docs, tasks, bounties, and proposals. It is a place for team contributors to coordinate day-to-day work, sign in with crypto wallets, and unlock workspaces with tokens and NFTs. It brings together onboarding, bounty management, proposals, project trackers, and data repositories all in one place. I use CharmVerse for my daily workflow, and you should too. CharmVerse is the sponsor of our Women in Web3 series, and the point of this series is to feature and promote badass women that are making waves in Web3. And we do have a POAP for our listeners today. I'll be dropping the secret phrase throughout the interview, so listen carefully and make sure you have the POAP mobile app so you're ready to mint. So today we are talking to Sutain Dong, partner at Multitudes and co-founder at Global Women in VC. Hi, Sutian.
Hi,
I'm
Alex.
well.
How
How are
are
you?
you?
Thanks for
I'm
taking the
good.
time. Of
Thanks for having
course. Thanks
me.
for taking the time to chat.
Happy to be here. Also happy that my internet is working. I was concerned at first. I was like, "Oh no, it's not going to be fast enough." I've had
Uh,
trouble with my
you
speeds
and me
lately.
both.
Such as thank you, Spectrum Internet of New York City, the best internet in the
It's
world.
supposed to be, right?
Right.
Well, it's no better up here in Maine, where I'm calling in from. So, yeah, I'm always worried about these spaces and things cutting out. So that's actually why I brought you on as a co-host. So if either of us lose it, we can hop right back on rather than losing the space.
Right. Unless both of us lose the space, and then it's game
Exactly.
over. But that's
Yeah.
not
Bye,
going to happen.
everyone. We're gone. Enjoy your weekend.
Right. Exactly.
Well, so hopefully we'll get some more people in here. But so you're in New York, wrapping up summer.
I am. It's I was outside earlier today, so I couldn't tell you how it feels right now, but it looks beautiful. And it was very cool. So we're in the early innings of fall, which is both wonderful in terms of what it feels like outside, and sort of scary given that I didn't really think it was going to be September so
I
soon.
agree. I'm like, what happened to summer? What did I even do?
You relax, hopefully. You
A little
hopefully
bit.
relax, got some sun, all that good
Yeah,
stuff.
some sun. But yeah, fall came quick and I'm with you. It's like I'm welcoming it. I'm excited for sweaters and the fall season, but I'm not quite ready to let go of summer yet. So maybe both of us can get out there later on today and soak up some more of that nice weather.
There you go. There you go. Fingers crossed on that.
So let's just start by jumping in and talking about Multitudes. So why don't you tell me about this project?
Yeah. So Multitudes, we're a fund. We invest in diverse founders across Web 2 and Web 3. We across a sort of a variety of instruments. We go from pre-seed angel stuff, sort of 25K angel checks, all the way up to pre-Series A. So anything before the Series A, we're sort of interested in looking at, and we cover the gamut from from consumer internet into where we're sort of looking into biological sort of fungal microbial solutions right now for waste management, for example. So it's a little bit all
Yeah.
over the place. But I'd like to say that we like to invest at least in weird people doing weird things. We typically like to invest at weird times of their funding cycle.
Okay, so what's a weird time? Is like now a weird time because of the bear market?
I think globally it's a weird time for sure. It depends on which bear market are you talking about. Are we talking about the Web 3 bear? Or are we talking about the sort of just general we'll call it declining public equities market?
Yeah, I mean all of the above, right? So you're not just focused on crypto stuff, you're all over the place.
We are, but a big reason why we're sort of interested in Web 3 generally is because I think it's one of the spaces within technology and innovation today where there are not a lot of we'll call it incumbent rules that have been established, right? So smart people who are going and operating in markets where sort of the upside is unbounded is super interesting. And moreover, I think unlike the rise of Web 2 within Web 3 specifically, you're seeing more women earlier than ever take active roles, whether it is participating in DAOs or in starting their own projects, and generally recognizing that contribution, activity, all of this stuff, especially in the Web3 world where it's still fairly nascent and fairly small, right? Having more female voices and perspectives around the table really can be instrumental in sort of architecting what the future of this industry will look
So
like.
I know you're the co-founder of Global Women in VC, but also as far as Multitudes, are you focused on women a lot in that project as well then?
Yeah, we're focused on people with diverse perspectives. I think diverse perspectives obviously covers women, but the way that we think about it is that everyone brings a different point of view to the table, right? And as a founder, that really informs how you think about the world and what opportunities that you see. And the opportunities that you see are a function of your lived experience, right? Who you are, where you grew up, where you went to school, who your friends are, where you hang out, right? Where you live, what your socioeconomic situation is. All those things will inform the lens with which you view opportunities, and also the lens with which you see opportunities and get excited about the big potential in some of them. And so when we think about diversity, women is a great place to look at, because the things that the problems that women want to solve may not be the obvious ones if you're to use the historic sort of heuristics of finding problems in Silicon Valley, for example, right? But that doesn't mean that they're any less interesting or any less important, right? They're just different, and they're coming to the fore because now there's female entrepreneurs who are seeing these things and saying, "Huh, I want to do something and develop a community there, right? Or develop a product there, or a service or a platform that serves a need that I am intimately familiar
Yeah.
with."
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you're giving these people an opportunity that they had a hard time breaking into, maybe in Web 2 or just, like you said, in the past, in any kind of business setting. Um, Amazing. So how did you, I'm kind of jumping around here, but how did you first start getting into being a founder? Big
Gosh,
question.
it's funny. It's a little bit funny because the way that I think about founders always been like, hey, founders are founders of companies,
Hmm.
right? But over the years, sort of my expansion and sort of my my definition, I should say, of a founder has expanded, right? Where I think there is, you can be a founder of a lot of different things, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a company. It can be of a community or a DAO, right? Or an initiative. And then you can also have a founder mentality, right? That you bring to the table and apply to whatever you're doing, even though you might not have been sort of the founder of the company or the project that you're
Right.
working on. And I think within Web3 too, a lot of that has flattened, right? Because DAOs, of course, have a lot of or certain projects, many projects, I should say, have a lot of core contributors. So it's not necessarily like there's one person who's holding the torch, or a group of a triumvirate of people that are holding the torch. But I guess to sort of answer your question around like being a founder, I don't know. I mean, I think I think a lot of the sort of why of being a founder is really comes back to sort of like scratching your own itch, right? And seeing something that you wish, or like, thinking about something that you wish you existed in the world, and then realizing that that doesn't exist yet, and then saying like, hey, wait a second, why can't I go do the thing, right, that I think should exist in the world? And deciding to go and do it. It's obviously easier said than done. And it's easier to go and do those steps than it is to sort of be long term successful. But I do think there's like a very very common core in sort of why people choose to found things.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So if we go back to Multitudes, how does a company or a founder, how do they how do they get to you? Do you find them? Do they find you? Do they pitch? How does it work?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a two-way street. I think, and it's a two-way street in both in terms of sourcing and also in terms of pitching, right? So I can speak to sort of my personal thinking about all of this, in that I have certain areas of interest, right? When I look at the world, and I have certain, we'll call it theses that I'm chasing, and that allows me to sort of have a have a desire to find stuff within, we'll call it in a place that I'm really digging into right now is waste management, which is not Web 3 at all. It's really not even Web 2, right? It's like moving bits, like physical bits
But
around in the
so
universe.
necessary in the universe.
Yeah, I mean, everyone buys stuff. Everyone creates all sorts of trash and garbage, and that has to go somewhere. But anyways, so there's certain things that I look for, right? And there's like an active outbound sourcing process, and then there's also people who come and pitch me for whatever reason they think I might be a good fit, right? Which is always, I'm always super grateful that they're thinking about me and of multitudes, and have found sort of found this avenue to pitch, or found this avenue, yeah, to pitch somehow. But I also think that, it's a two-way street when it comes to convincing people to take money, right? Because it's really a partnership, and it's not necessarily like a pure play buy sell relationship where you're selling equity and I'm the buyer on the other side. But I think as a founder of really anything, when you're looking to partner, whether it's with financial partners or with other partners, it's really making sure that that's a good fit too, right? So if I always tell founders, I'm like, hey, like whoever you decide to work with who's giving you money, like maybe sometimes you don't really have a choice, right, with who you take money from just because the market or the demand for your specific product. But oftentimes you do, and it's important to make sure that you're aligned with the people who are looking to
So is
invest. So I think a lot of that is pitching as well, to be like, hey, this is, you know, this is what I can bring to the table. I'm great at helping you with marketing, or I'm great at helping you with PR and branding, and I would be awful at helping you with technology, actual development. Does
yeah,
that make sense?
definitely. So yeah, making sure you're aligned and that's going to be the right fit as far as that investment. So VC isn't necessarily the ideal option for every new company.
Oh my gosh, no. And I think especially within the Web3 space, you're seeing a lot of I think this fractionalization of what funding pathways can look like, right? If you're in the traditional venture world, you would say, hey, I'm raising money for my startup. I'm looking to raise money from first angels and then VCs. And there's very like finite paths that you're following. And now I think within the Web3 world, certainly starting with the ICO boom, and now with NFT projects, even though there's obviously a rise and fall in the interest in all of these things. There's different ways to capitalize your business, right? And even from like a VC's perspective, when you're looking at where equity value is going to accrue within a
Uh-oh.
project, sometimes it's unclear. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you started to break up.
Oh,
But I don't know if it's me or you. So
oh no, Spectrum, if you're listening, fix my internet. Um, well, yeah, it's sometimes unclear, I guess, where equity value is going to accrue early on in a project, because sometimes it might be in the business itself, right? The business that you're funding. But if the business is issuing a token, for example, a lot of that value might just accrue in the token, right? And you might be able to make money liquidly trading,
yeah,
right? Versus in sort of the equity value that lies within the sort of operating business behind the protocol.
right. Yeah, that makes sense. So how and when did multitudes come about?
Yeah, so I guess we were started. Oh wow, how do I think about the Once Upon a Time story? I guess in 2020 we were started with this idea that it's a simple idea, and it is a lot bigger than what we're trying to change. But like, it was started with the idea that the world is changing, right? And it's changing in a lot of different ways. And what was really interesting, and sort of the specific change that we were narrowing in on, was that the sort of archetype, going back to one of your earlier questions, Alex, the archetype of what made a founder was changing as well, right? So it
Mhm.
was no longer you no longer necessarily had to look like you came out of central casting,
Yeah,
right? You didn't no longer had to look like you just rolled off a sandhill road to become a successful founder. And with the sort of with the rise of Web3, that's only accelerated, right? You no longer, like, oftentimes you can be pseudonymous as a founder, right? You no longer have to be a founder and have have people know who you are IRL,
Mm-hmm.
right? To be able to do something interesting. And Multitudes was founded to take advantage of some of those dislocations, right? Of both the fact that there are founders that look really different than they did before, and furthermore, that there were founders that were starting a lot of different things, right? That weren't necessarily constrained to the traditional, we'll call it US C corp model,
Yeah.
right? Whether that is being the founder or one of the progenitors of a DAO or some other project, or a fund, right? There's lots of ways of being a founder now, and I think that diversity of pathing creates a lot of opportunities for investors to invest in interesting things if they can be open, right, to some of the different ways that that new projects are being set up.
Yeah, I mean, the world's changing. And I like that you mentioned that. The whole, especially in Web3, the anonymity aspect is very appealing to a lot of people, you know? You don't need to have your face on the front of it or your real name on the front of it. You know, you can really have some sort of anonymity and privacy still.
Yeah, the anonymity thing I think is a double-edged sword. I know this isn't exactly where we're going to
I
go with
know.
this conversation, but the anonymity thing is sort of a double-edged sword, right? Because in one side, and I don't talk about women specifically, there is a how would I say? There's a freedom in not being no to being sort of stereotyped, right, on the internet, if you can hide behind an avatar or have, a cat be your face instead of your
Yeah.
headshot. That sort of, and that's great, right? Because no longer, if you're a female founder, like, you're a founder, right? It doesn't really matter. You're a founder that looks like a cat on the internet. Cool, right? We don't know who you are behind that. I think one of the challenges, or something that we sort of as an industry want to be aware of, though, is that I think the how would I say, the fallback assumption within this industry is that if you're anonymous on the internet, the assumption in most people's head is probably that you're a
Yep.
dude on the other side,
100%.
right? And what that means, though, is that a lot of the experiences, if everyone thinks that, right, then many of the experiences that we're building without an explicit focus on a different audience within Web3 are still going to be focused on dudes on the internet,
Right.
right? And so without, I think uh the anonymity or student anonymity allows one to blend in, and so it can be really beneficial on a personal level, right? But it doesn't necessarily showcase the diversity of thought and the diversity of background that participants within this ecosystem have, right?
Yes, that's very true.
And that, you run the risk of sort of homogenizing the focus of projects and of value if everyone assumes that, like, hey, the majority of people are probably gonna like the things that I would assume. And again, I don't mean to pick on dudes or men, right? Like, that dudes on the internet might
Yeah.
have, right? And so I'm not making a value judgment of this being good or this being bad, but I do think this is something that we should be aware of.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point because I think a lot of people do like the anonymity aspect, but I think you're right that we want to instead really focus on the diversity of this space and how great that is and how inclusive it can be. I personally come from the beer world before Web3 and talk about another dude dominated world, and with a name like Alex, everyone just assumes, in writing that I'm a dude,
Right, right.
So in a way, it's almost like I have these great relationships over online or whatever, and then we meet and they're like, "Oh, I just always assumed you were a dude." But it's like, well, what would have been different if you knew I wasn't,
Right.
So in a way, it's good because I got that, whether it was respect or just being taken seriously because they assumed this. But it's also really frustrating because, they put me in that box. I'm like them. So it is. I think you're right. It is a double-edged sword. But to get back on
Yep.
track to talk about your projects, so what is your role at Multitudes?
So I'm a partner, which means, and I started the firm, which means I do a lot of things, but my primary passion and focus is supporting entrepreneurs. So finding great companies to invest in and hopefully not just convince them to take my money, but also to figure out ways that we can be meaningfully helpful. And I know most VCs say that, and there's a lot of different VCs that have a lot of different strategies in developing platforms. We're a little bit earlier sort of in our development as a firm. And so a lot of what that means for us is just one-on-one support with founders and using a really bespoke, I think, a bespoke process to figure out what exactly we can do to sort of make the path of entrepreneurship a little bit easier.
Yeah. So what does your day-to-day look like? Are you mostly in meetings? Are you taking pitches? Are you researching people and ideas that you want to work with?
I don't know if there's a typical day to day. I would say that a week to week, that sounds about right. I think that the sort of ebb and flow of what I'm doing will just depend with, in some ways, it depends with the seasons as well. I know COVID, and I can speak for me personally, was hugely dislocating. And so this is maybe the first quarter since March of 2020 that I feel like, speaking from where I sit in New York, things have been back in swing and people have been meeting, and it's it's causing these sort of these new opportunities and sort of associated challenges to arise, which are totally champagne problems, right? I recognize that, but it's like, oh, well, how now that meetings are happening in person, like you forget how efficient Zoom is because you're so used to it, right? And you're sitting at home, like you're sitting at a chair all day long. And now you're like, oh, I have to go from place to place, which means I can't just, I can't just, teleport myself from one coffee shop to the other. I have to walk.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, okay, got it. Like we have to put time into that. And so a lot of my next couple months actually are going to be a little bit, I think, different than the last couple of years, which has been more in person stuff, more conferences, and one thing I found specifically about Web3, even with the last couple
did
of
we
years,
lose you?
is that am I here?
Sutian, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Uh-oh.
Nope, you're back.
Oh, I'm back. Oh man.
You're back. All right. So you're talking conferences coming up.
Oh yeah. Just like, more conferences for me the next couple of months than before. But like what I will say with Web3, and I've always found this energy to be true, even within like within the Web2 world, is that it's people who know each other through the internet, I should say, get such a huge kick and so much energy from meeting each other in person.
Okay. Yes.
Oh man.
All right. You're back.
Okay. Well, tech challenges. As
we might have set ourselves up for failure by talking about our internet problems.
I know, Spectrum heard and they're punishing us. Oh yeah. So I mean, speaking of tech challenges, I do think like, within the Web3 context, there's so much energy that people get from being in person, right? Like it's the difference, when you've gotten to know a whole community online, and then sort of you instantiate that in a 3D world, people are like, oh my God, this is so awesome, right? 2D is great. I get to sit at home and do, be more flexible. But I think having, that's one thing I found to be really true about generally the Web3 community, and its various pockets and permutations. It's very, very, for all that we do on the internet and for all the amount of time that we exist online, being in person and being able to share ideas, and find collaborators IRL is still a hugely energizing piece of, this whole ecosystem.
Definitely. I agree. Just meeting someone, seeing their face in person, being able to sit down and have a conversation, makes such a difference. As far as conferences, any chance you're going to DevCon in Bogota?
It's on my calendar, so we'll see.
Oh, okay.
I did not buy a ticket, and so I will have to. It's one of those like, who has a ticket and isn't going kind of thing. So we'll see. It's on my calendar. I was a little bit tardy in terms of deciding, and so if I am there, I assume I will see you IRL.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, CharmVerse team is going. So I'm excited to connect with some people. So if you do, let us know.
For sure.
So something fun we did for today is we created a POAP in your honor. I don't know if you collect POAPs, but if you go on to the POAP mobile app and click Mint and enter the secret Deep Green, all lowercase, 2 words, you will see your Sutain Dong app from CharmVerse.
That is awesome. I am excited.
Yeah, and if you don't have the mobile app, let me know and I can just send you a direct link as well to Mint. So what does your team look like over there? Who are you working with?
We are really, really small. So it's me and my partner, and it's just the two of us right now. And so we have a bunch of people that we're
Wow.
lucky to sort of collaborate with on a part-time basis. But it is very startup-y in that sense as well.
Also really exciting though.
Yes.
Like you pick this person to work with, you work well together, I assume, and all you can do from here is grow. So that's exciting.
Yes, no, that's 100% right. There's definitely how would I say, there's definitely a lot of opportunity to move in different directions. And I think we're at a really interesting time in the market, just with the sort of the global macro outlook. The sort of common knowledge within venture is that the best times to invest are the worst times in the market, and like the best times to start a company are like the worst times, in the economy. And so I think historically that's held to be pretty true. Not that you can't start great companies in good times either, but I think it's an exciting time to be more nimble and agile.
So when you were starting your first company, did you have to go through the whole like make your pitch VC route?
So I know
Did you
I
do
was
that
never a
personally?
company founder, actually, and so
Oh.
I have a ton of respect for the people who have started companies, but I have never. God, I can't tell you how many pitches I've seen in my lifetime, but I've never actually had to make one. I don't know. It's funny. You can see them all day long from one side, but I've never pitched a startup, like a company, in my life before.
Me either. It seems very daunting. And yeah, you need to be ready to just keep moving forward, right? I mean, take the nose and keep going. Don't let it cut you down.
For sure.
It's what it seems. So well, you said you're never a founder, but you are a co-founder of Global Women in VC, right?
Yes, that's right. So, Global Women in VC is now the largest community of women in VC in the world. So, it's about 4,300 women.
Amazing.
It's super exciting. 4,300
Wait,
women.
I'm sorry, I
Oh
interrupted you.
no,
How many women?
4,300. So, it's a
Wow.
ton of, yeah. I never really. We actually, funny. I guess fun fact. We don't actually know how many women in venture there are in the world, right? Women in VC is by far the largest organization, and we are one of, I think, really the only global one. But it's not like we can ask Google how many women in venture there are, right? There's not like a statistic for that, which is sort of interesting. And so we definitely have the most coverage, but is that 50%? Is that 95%? I actually don't know.
That is crazy, but that's amazing that you're doing this. How do you get involved with that community? How would someone get involved?
Yeah, it's totally meritocratic. You can go to our website, www.womens-vc.com. And if you are a woman who is employed on a full-time basis at a venture capital fund, it could be an institutional venture fund, a corporate VC, a family office that makes direct investing. So basically, you're managing somebody else's money, right? And taking
Mhm.
that and making small, equity investments into startups, technology startups, then you can be a part of the network. And so there's an application form. You fill it out. We're not sort of curating the membership, and I say curating in air quotes. So we're not Soho House. We're not saying like, oh, like we want to create this community that we're sort of shaping, but it's really inclusive. It's really friendly. It's really designed such that if you're a woman in venture, you can get plugged into the largest, deepest network of other people like you.
That's awesome. I love that. Um, FYI, this interview I will post to YouTube eventually with subtitles as well, so people will still have access to this whole thing and all this information as well.
Cool.
I'm curious what tips you would give out to others that are trying to get started with a company, that have gone through or are going through some of the things you have had to go through in the past. What are some tips you would give out there?
Mm. Um, Gosh, I would say get started doing versus thinking. I'm going to pull a heuristic that I've read from somewhere. I don't remember. So I don't remember where, so I can't quote it or attribute it accurately. But it's like, I think like doing should be 80% and thinking should be 20% when you're doing like, when you're doing something. I think a lot of startups, and people, founders reference their startups as their baby and blah, blah, blah. And all of that makes sense, right? Like it takes a ton of labor, a ton of energy, to get something off the ground and go from 0 to 1. But a lot of like it's inevitable that you'll make mistakes. It's inevitable that there's going to be stuff where 2 years later you'll be like, wow, if I knew what I know now, I wouldn't have done those 17 things. But that's sort of a part of the journey, right? And so I think in terms of
Hmm.
getting started, it's simplistic, but it's like going and getting started, right? And maybe also accepting that like some things are just going to be wrong.
Right. Right. No, I like that because as someone that I would call myself an overthinker, I think that's great advice. Like just hit the ground running, just get going, and you'll figure it out along the way. It's like the best laid plans, right? It's not all going to go as you want it
And
to.
that's right. Like best laid plans, man plans, God laughs, like same thing.
Hmm. Hmm. So you were touching on this, but what is something that you think you did very right and or something that you might change if you could do it over again?
You mean like in my lifetime or?
I think business wise, we've already gone off track here, but
Right.
wherever you want to take that, I guess.
It's a good question. I would say that, I think I've been lucky in having, having enough confidence, in following my gut, right? And having that be right, or at least trending towards right when it comes to making investment decisions. And like a good example of that is a company that I think a lot of if you are a sort of Gen Z or millennial woman in the U.S., I would be surprised if you hadn't heard of this app called CoStar, which is an astrology app.
Yep.
It's like very very sort of part of pop culture now. But it's I was as an investor. This was back when I was co-managing a fund called Female Founders Fund. I was really interested in astrology as an investment category. And I was telling people about it, and people were like, "Oh, that's super weird. It's like snake oil, right? Or it's like, it's like the 1888 number that you call late at night and it's $1 a minute kind of thing." Like, oh, like we don't know if this is this is something we should be investing in. And I had a totally different perspective around that. That was just built by having been a consumer investor for a bunch of years and seeing how some of those trends were changing and seeing the rise in sort of we'll call it a consumerized interest in astrology that wasn't really based on fleecing people, right, to tell their fortunes.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and and that turned out to be, it was an unpopular opinion when when I was looking for opportunities, and I was lucky enough to meet Banu and the team and led their pre-seed round. But it was it was one of those things that turned out to be pretty right around like seeing around the corner, right, in terms of
Yeah.
feeling like, oh, this is going to be a thing, and being like, yeah, it was a thing, cool, right? Not to say that I'm right all the time, right? But I think the inverse of not being brave enough to take that step or not being confident enough to take that step is that you miss the boat, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that I've been lucky to be historically pretty good at. And then I would say the one of the bigger lessons for me is that I actually have a lot of trouble taking my own advice, and so I think I'm pretty good at giving advice to other people. This is certainly not uncommon for people generally, but when it comes to myself, like sometimes, like I just said, I was like, hey, like uh, uh getting started, it's just about sort of getting started, right? 80% is just doing. um Sometimes I have trouble taking that advice for myself, where I'm like, oh, well, it has to be perfect, this thing, like people are
Mhm.
going to judge me, or it has to be this, like it has to be 99% there, right, before it can go out into the world. And not things just don't happen that way in real life, right? And so I say that because I think that lack of action, right, is or the indecision is the decision in itself, right? The lack of action creates like that is the world that you're living in. And so my lesson to myself is a lot of the things I tell other founders or other entrepreneurs, I don't necessarily take do a good job of listening to, and then I see the sort of effect, right? Or rather the lack of effect of my lack of action.
Right. Right. I mean, I've had the same thing, you choose not to take action and then you're like, well, why didn't I just do it? Why didn't I just get started at that point when I was, just the procrastination? Or I like the whole following your gut, especially when you have proof of having a pretty good track record. But I like these questions. I feel like I learn a lot from my guests each week. So I always appreciate these insights. We are running a little short on time, but how has your experience been specifically in Web3, as a woman? How do you feel that's gone thus far?
It's a good question. I'll answer that in two ways. I'd say one, not having ever been in sort of a male presenting body, I can't really say right what that different like if there's the difference, right?
Hmm.
So in some ways, I'm like, I don't know if my experience has been totally different, right? And I've been really lucky to not have experienced like overt misogyny or sexism in sort of my uh, uh, work in Web3 or my participation in Web3. But I think one of the really exciting parts about being a woman in Web3 is unlike maybe 10 years ago in the internet, right? Web 2, whatever you want to call it, like where it felt like there were just fewer female perspectives and voices, right? Or women led perspectives and voices. Now there's a lot more noise and interest in that, which I think is super awesome, right? There's so many female focused projects and along any number of vectors, right? Education, empowerment, supporting artists, technical up leveling, like all sorts of things, right? That are specifically female oriented. That if you're to wind back 10 years ago and looked at what was available in sort of on online at that point for women, it was much less, right? And so it's really exciting to see all of this activity, right? And even the you and my conversation right now, and the podcast or the space focused on, I think women is a prime example of that, right? Oh, not a lot of this stuff existed 10 years ago. And
Right.
so one of the exciting parts about being a woman in Web3 right now is feeling that it's certainly not as being a woman in Web3 is not as small of a part of the population, right? Or at least it doesn't feel like that as maybe being a woman in tech 10 years ago.
Yeah. Well, that was going to be my other question. Like, how does that differ your Web3 experience versus just being a woman in the business world, which has also been male dominated traditionally?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that some of the start conditions are a little bit different now, right? In that, like, there have been women who have earned money and made, have become impactful or wealthy through their work in Web 2, and have taken that influence and that leverage and that capital and applied that to sort of opening up more doors in Web 3, which is super exciting. And so, I would say that that's there's just, gosh, I would say that there just feels like there's so much more noise, right? More activity. And I don't mean noise in like a noisy bad way, but there's just more happening, right? And
Yeah.
more explicitly happening for women in Web 3. And I think if everyone does their jobs right, and the world continues turning in the ways that we hope it will sooner or later, right? The hope is that being a woman in Web 3 will be notable, if like not because being a woman is a rarity, right? Or an anomaly in the space, but more like, oh, that's like, it's like you like cheesesteak. Okay, cool. Like cheesesteak lovers in Web 3 as well. Right. I think it's a silly example, but but you sort of get what I'm saying. It's
Yeah,
not,
I mean,
yeah.
it's a new enough industry that now is the time that whoever can get involved, as long as they're willing to throw themselves into it and learn, right? And there's so much time right now. So hopefully it will be one of the most diverse spaces that we'll have experienced, is my hope.
100%. 100%. That is definitely the hope that yeah, that is definitely the hope that I think we're all gunning behind, right? That
Yeah,
the diversity of experiences will be welcomed.
yeah, absolutely. Do you have a woman that in your life, in your professional experience, or in Web3 that has been like an inspiration to you or that you look up to most?
A woman who's been an inspiration to me. I mean, I definitely shout out my co-founder and Women in VC, Jessica Pelt. So she and I started Women in VC back in 2015. She's the founder of a VC firm called Hannah Gray, and she's also super involved in Web3. And one of the things that we did for the Women in VC community is we did an NFT drop in March of this year in honor of Women's History Month, and also in honor of hitting 400, excuse me, 4,000 women in our community. So like a bunch of things to celebrate, I would say. And it was really to get more women in our community, in the Women in VC community, involved in Web3.
Yeah,
And I think it's just being around that kind of energy and being around that kind of intent to not just make great investments, which is, I think, the North Star for everyone who is a funder, but also to make sure that if we're excited about the growth of certain ecosystems and the growth of Web3 specifically, then we can be, how would I say, then we can make sure that we're doing our job in growing the ecosystem, right, in a way that ensures that different ideas are intelligently supported by capital and ecosystems and communities and people, right? And
yeah,
so that creates the diversity of thought. I think that engenders the stuff that comes into the world that really should exist, right? That just hasn't gotten started yet.
yeah. So, what's next for you personally, or for both of the organizations you're a part of?
Mm, that is
Sneak.
that is a good question. I think it's just really doing more of the same. I'm really excited about what's going to happen in Web3 generally. I think the one of the nice things about being an early stage investor is that the obviously we're all personally affected by the macro that's happening in the world. I'm not no so obviously global tensions, geopolitical dislocation, rising interest rates, recessionary environment. Like, there's all these things that are happening both domestically and internationally. But it's I think it's a really lucky position to be in, to be able to say, like, hey, as part of my job, one of the things that I get to do is talk to and get inspired by, and hopefully be helpful to great entrepreneurs who have visions of changing the world. And so some of that is like, hey, what's next? Like, hopefully I get to continue doing that.
So, to wrap it up, I'm going to give you a nice heavy question for Friday afternoon. Um,
Perfect.
Describe the rest of your life in 5 words.
Oh man.
Just
That
nice and
is
light.
a big, nice, heavy question. I think I did see that. I did see that in your prep questions. I'm gonna take a beat and think about it.
Well, while you're
Um,
doing that, I'm just going to give another POAP shout out. So, if any of our listeners want to mint a Sutain Dong special POAP from CharmVerse, you just need to go to the POAP mobile app, click mint, and go to the secret phrase and enter deep green. It's all lowercase, 2 words, deep green. Is that enough of a beat for you?
yes, that was a good number of beats. I would say uh full of growth, courage, impact.
I like it. I'm always so curious what people will say, and they go different ways with it, but I like that.
If I had more time, I could have been pithier, but
I think
you
that's
know.
good. I would panic if someone asked me that, but I think last week it was like big land, lots of animals. It's
Okay,
just like,
there we go.
so they're always so different. I'm always surprised, but I always enjoy them. So, well,
100%.
Sutian, it has been a pleasure speaking with you. You've been a great guest. I'm really excited about what you're doing and was happy to hear more about both of the projects you're working on. I hope that we will be able to connect in Bogota if you make it there for DevCon. And I really appreciate you taking the time. Any listeners, you can find any of our interviews on the CharmVerse YouTube channel. So you can go back if you want to listen to any of those or any of our past today's or any past interviews. Please go give Sutian a follow. It's at Sutain Dong, or you can go to at Multitudes World to see one of the projects she's working on. Does the Global Women in VC have a Twitter handle?
It does. It's women_VC.
Okay. Women_VC. Go check that out too. Very cool networking for anyone in the investment world, women in the investment world. And yeah, so thanks again for taking the time. It's been a pleasure. I really do hope we get to meet in real life soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
All right.
Thanks a
Have a
lot.
great weekend.
You too.
And next week, listeners, we have Dao Sasha of Azuro Protocol. We'll be talking GameFi, business development, and betting in Web3. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye, Sutian.